The Sherlock Holmes Advent Calendar. An Odyssey Through Jerusalem by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Nora Godwin. Narrated by Peter Silverleaf. 5. Into the City. The rest of our journey in the Orient Express went without any special incidents. Of course, there was still the one or other interesting acquaintance made among the travellers, especially since new people joined on the way. Holmes, for example, frequently discussed problems of algebra with a Serbian mathematician, while a professor of medicine from Königsberg and his assistants have become my regular table companions. However, the two left us at Sofia train station to travel on to Transylvania. The young lady from France, who initially had a false impression about me, proved to be a very talented soprano who was invited to sing in front of the Sultan himself. She was intended as Constance in the Abduction from the Seraglio. The fellow travellers from the European aristocracy, however, preferred to stay among themselves and did not mingle with us. Somewhat more difficult to keep at a distance were the nouveaux riches from North America who wanted to do business in the Ottoman Empire. Their sociability sometimes overwhelmed me. Despite the considerate span of the journey, it was rather entertaining, and finally, after crossing Bulgaria, we reached eastern Thrace, and thus the Ottoman territory. The entry formalities, which were taken a little more seriously at this border than between European countries, were quickly completed for Holmes and me, because we were identified by our papers as consulting detectives in favour of the Sultan's government. In this sense, we were treated with somewhat overdrawn respect, which continued upon our arrival in Constantinople. After we had said goodbye to our travel acquaintances, we were immediately welcomed at the train station by a small delegation. We were amazed when we saw our means of transport. Not a carriage drawn by horses, but a modern motor car from German production took us into the city. The emerging alliance between Berlin and the Sublime Porte had apparently already paid off. And so we drove with a so-called automobile to the Yildiz Palace. Constantinople was, of course, one of the most important and impressive cities of current times, even if the Ottoman Empire and its centre were already severely tarnished politically and economically. However, it still demonstrated an ancient culture and history, from the founding of ancient Greek Byzantium, the expansion of the settlement by the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, who the city is named after, to the rise to the second capital of the Roman Empire and the sole capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. This was followed at the end of the Middle Ages by the conquest of the Ottomans, who showed a much more benign rulership than the Christian Crusaders, who also passed through this city. The omnipresent symbol of the centuries-long land grab of the Muslim Ottomans is the Hagia Sophia, once the largest Christian church in the world, but since then it has been turned into a mosque. To this day, Constantinople has nevertheless retained a multicultural and linguistically diverse character. In addition to the dominant Turks, there are Greeks, Italians, Armenians, Kurds, Jews, and Arabs, but also the great powers present on the Bosporus with their trading branches. For several years, the Ottomans have been pushing the new name Istanbul for Constantinople, which was derived from the Greek phrase for to the city. Yildiz Palace was in reality a complex with many buildings with different functions. Of course, the Sultan also resided in one. It is self-explanatory that we were not scheduled to meet him personally. Instead, our escort took us to the office of an obviously high-state official who acted as a liaison officer to the British government. He was a man in his 30s, with the obligatory moustache, fanciful and ornate uniform, and the traditional headgear of the fez. He greeted us in almost impeccable English. "Welcome to Istanbul, gentlemen," he said, offering us 2 gold-coloured chairs in front of his huge desk to take a seat on. "My name is Mohammed Saeed Alim. On behalf of the exalted Sultan, I would like to express our pleasure that Her Majesty Queen Victoria has given us such competent support. Your reputation, Mr. Holmes, of course precedes you." "The pleasure is all ours," Holmes replied, "but I would like to assure you that not everything that is reported about me and my work is true." Saeed Alim showed a smile and said, Oh, don't worry about the incidents in Greece. We thought they were quite amusing. The Ionians do not understand diplomacy and manners. Under Ottoman rule, this would certainly not have happened in Athens." Holmes nodded politely, but still tried to quickly leave the subject behind. "What happened, happened," he explained. "We want to dedicate ourselves to the present. Now that Dr. Watson and I have been on the road for a few days, you certainly want to present us with an up-to-date status report from Palestine?" "Indeed," the Ottoman official confirmed. "Unfortunately, the recent news is not too good. There have been more attacks in Jerusalem to undermine our authority. A weapons depot was blown up. It was completely destroyed." "Hopefully there were no casualties," I interjected. "Fortunately not," Saeed Alim replied. "The 2 soldiers guarding the location had been overwhelmed before the explosion and taken out of the danger zone. They were later found unconscious but unharmed in a sheepfold on the outskirts of the city." Holmes thought for a few seconds, then concluded. "This is strange. The attackers are apparently trying to avoid any casualties. It even seems absurd that the weapons arsenal was blown up like that. If I were to prepare for an uprising, I would try to get my hands on weapons and ammunition, not destroy them. These people are not successful at resistance." "No, they are not fighting for freedom," the official replied immediately. "They are merely terrorists. For my part, even stupid terrorists, but still terrorists. There is no doubt about that." "Don't get me wrong," Holmes explained in response to the objection. "I'm not interested in understanding the perpetrator's cause, but in understanding their actions. This is the key to tracking them down and putting a stop to it." "This is the plan," said Saeed Alim. "Anyway, the attack on the weapons depot was not the only event I have to bring to your attention. A multilingual pamphlet was distributed among the population representing an attack on the Ottoman sovereignty. We did an English translation of the text." With these words, he took a piece of paper from a drawer and handed it to Holmes. He set out to read it while I looked over his shoulder. The following words were written on the pamphlet. "Freedom for Palestine. The Ottoman occupation brings us only oppression, exploitation, and poverty. Our people are denied a free and self-determined development. The occupiers must leave the country so that Palestine has a future again. Ottomans, go home." "In a nutshell," I commented, "but it remains unclear. Who is this text aimed at?" "My only answer would be," Saeed Alim replied, "to no one and to everyone. The pamphlet possibly resonates within all of the population. Arabs, Bedouins, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Egyptians. They could all possibly conspire against the Sultan. There are certainly rallies for the terrorists and more acts of civil disobedience." "And the Ottoman administration and army are not in a position to end this?" I asked with a slightly mocking undertone. "You're not exactly squeamish about the Armenians." This remark was, of course, a bit of a provocation, but the Turkish official remained calm. "This is something completely different," he claimed. "You cannot rule Jerusalem with the sword. It is the city of peace. The Sultan would be heartbroken should military intervention become necessary. That is precisely the reason why we rely on your valued cooperation. Stop these attacks and agitation with your methods, and peace will be preserved in Jerusalem." Holmes nodded. "I understand," he said. "However, this is a great responsibility that you are burdening us with. Of course, we will do our utmost to justify your trust. There is probably no time to lose." "Indeed," Saeed Alim confirmed. "Tomorrow morning your ship departs. This will be much faster and less tedious than the land route. A contact man from the Ottoman Palestinian police is waiting for you in Jaffa. He will escort you to Jerusalem and stand by your side all the way." "A watchdog," I said with an irritated smile. "A supporter," the official corrected. "He is knowledgeable about the area and speaks all the necessary languages. Of course, he is also a capable investigator." "Thank you," Holmes said. "His help will certainly prove to be extremely useful. If you will allow me, we would now like to retire to our rooms. We have had an arduous journey, and we would like to board the ship all fresh and cheerful the next morning." "Of course," replied Saeed Alim. "In front of the building the motor carriage is waiting to take you to your accommodation. I wish you all the best for your mission. May Allah protect you in your ways." We thanked politely and said goodbye. The promised automobile paved our way through the busy streets of Constantinople, but it was only a short distance from the Yildiz Palace in the Beşiktaş district to the Pera Palace Hotel in neighbouring Beoglu on the north bank of the Golden Horn. As in Vienna, we had been accommodated in a luxury hotel. Built in the neo-Rococo style, the house was not only magnificent on the outside, but also on the inside. It was owned by the French International Sleeper Cabin Industries, which also oversaw the Orient Express. And so it was no surprise that we met familiar faces in the hotel lobby. It turned out that Holmes dined with Mr. Obelik, the mathematician from Serbia, while I had a few drinks at the bar with the French soprano, whose name I haven't mentioned yet. It was Natalie. Despite the pleasant company, we went to our rooms well before midnight to rest up for the coming day. From my window on the 4th floor there was a breathtaking view over the Bosporus. The fact that this strait not only connected the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, but also separated Europe from Asia, made it a meeting point of cultures and historical events. Jason and the Argonauts had to pass it to win the Golden Fleece. The Persian king Darius had a temporary bridge built consisting of ships to have his gigantic army transferred. And to this day, the Bosporus and its control remain strategically important, as can be seen in particular in the smouldering Ottoman-Russian conflict. Since the Crimean War, the strait has had the status of an international waterway, which is why merchant ships of all nations are allowed to pass through unhindered. Of course, the Bosporus is closed to warships, which is of course not in favour of distant St. Petersburg and the Tsar's Black Sea fleet. One truly does not have to be an overly enlightened prophet to foresee that not only the Bosporus, but also the city of Constantinople will continue to be of considerable interest to the great powers, possibly sparking military conflicts. It is no coincidence that the Sultan has been living in the Yildiz Palace we visited for several years now. His previous residence, the famous Topkapi Palace, was an easy target for the cannons of the warships sailing in the Bosporus. The move had been a precautionary measure so that the ruler would not one day be exposed to enemy artillery unexpectedly in his private chambers. After enjoying the view for a few minutes and sorting through my thoughts, I went to bed. The next morning, we had to leave for a longer boat trip whose destination lay on the coast of the Holy Land.